Slowly, as some of the boys would get homesick or want to get married or this and that, they'd leave, and I would hire Canadian musicians that had been, following us around or watching us, or we knew of them.
The first recruit is a persistent, street-smart Toronto kid. Robbie Robertson would finally claim his spot after a series of heated guitar duels.
Hawk now was always looking to set something like that up, get a couple of real good players and pit them against each other and have them try and just, one of them cut the other until he was bleeding,
Robbie looked at me one day and said, "Fred, you're a great guitar player, but one of these days I'm gonna cut you. I'm gonna beat you." I said, "Well, okay, your lessons are over, son."
Robbie started getting really good, and just in leaps and bounds, because he worked at it 7 days a week, night and day.
So from then on stage, I turned my back to Robbie, so he couldn't see my fingers. I wouldn't let him see my fingers. I was highly offended.
With Levon and Robbie in the group, the Hawk runs into an apprentice butcher with rock and roll ambitions.
Well, I had never seen a rockabilly live show like the likes of Ronnie Hawkins. Giving up so much energy, showing the people just rockabilly music was just another force, and that was some heavy rock and roll in them days for me. I was so impressed that I booked myself to be his opening act that following spring for 5 shows.
Also gunning for a spot in the Hawks is a Stratford, Ontario soul disciple whose voice immediately catches Hawkins' ear, Richard Manuel.
When it was time for us to need a piano player, I called Richard and he came in. At that time, of course, after having Stan, Celeste, Richard was not quite adequate on the piano, but he could play simple, but Richard had a throat. Richard could really sing that rhythm and blues stuff and soul stuff.
Garth Hudson is the missing piece of Ronnie's musical puzzle.
We needed someone to teach us a little music, and we needed someone to show Richard a lot of stuff. Garth had some kind of a jazz band or something there in London, Ontario. He'd played with different people, and he was kind of known as the musician's musician.
I talked to Robbie and Levon about playing, and I said, I can't play that stuff, I can't play like that guy. He bleeds,
Ronnie appealed to the musicianship of the band and how much better we all could be with Garth, giving us music lessons and helping us find some teachers to study with and so forth, and let Garth's family know that we weren't just there to, play every club and drink everything in every club that we played. It did have a purpose.
Everything Garth hit seemed to fit. The rest of them, they'd play through things and do this and do that, but Garth would hit notes and music that we weren't familiar with, but it seemed like, man, it just laid right in there, just give it a little push.
Toronto was the best I've ever seen. There were more places to play. Well, if you went on up to North Young and started with Oscar Peterson and Ed Thigpen and people like that who played up in the jazz clubs on the north end, if you came on down and came by the Zanzibar, you might have Billy Riley there from Memphis. You'd come to the Edison Hotel, Carl Perkins would be there. We'd be with the Hawk next door at the Lecoq door. Ray Charles and his orchestra might be around at Massey Hall. Cannonball Adderley and his band would be at the Colonial, and maybe Harry Belafonte down at O'Keefe Center.
We'd start maybe at 8:30 or 9, and we'd play for 30 minutes and break for 30 minutes up until 1 o'clock. We'd do about 5 or 6 sets.
We were playing 7 days a week and practicing at least 5, and so they really got good and tight.
I'd cut out back door, and I'd be standing behind the stage listening to these guys. They were strong. They were as good as any rockabilly players anywhere.
there's still guitar players everywhere that used to just come in just to watch Robbie, and the drummers used to come in just to watch Levon. They all had a fan club and a following, each and every one of them.
And we always drew so well that it would be extended for 2 or 3 weeks, so you get to know the night people. Besides the people coming into the club, you get to know all the street people, the rounders, and on, and the doormen and the managers of the different clubs. And they were always there on their breaks, you know, to see Rompin' Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks.
See, we lived at the Warwick Hotel, and back then, the Warwick Hotel, you know, was the red light district. And we learned every pimp's first name. Levon can still remember. And all the hookers, you know, we knew by their first names, and every now and then they'd slip in and give us a little freebie.
So basically, we would just each drink, sleep, play, and party. It was a pretty rough life.
With the recently married Hawkins taking a few nights off each week, the group begins to indulge themselves with some musical influences of their own.
Oh yeah, we stayed in touch with anything that was going on from the South and the urban stuff too, you know. We like Stanley Turrentine and Cannonball Adderley.
Mainly, we wanted different music. We wanted to play some stuff that the Hawk knew wasn't going to go over, and but we didn't know it and wanted to play it, and did, and it didn't go over.
You know, I was from the old school. You have to play what the people want, you know, and I had to contend with the bar managers or the club managers. And so when they'd get four out there doing some of that stuff, it wasn't going over to our clientele. Man, for the few people who did dig it, really dug it, because they knew that this band had something special.
And along in there, we started dreaming about us singing all the songs. And that side man, front man routine was getting a little bit old for us. And we wanted to do it with no front man. We wanted to do it where we did all the singing and all the playing.